Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video I will be showing you guys how to fetch your data from WordPress and expose it to the REST API. So I'm just going to go ahead here and get started. You'll see here on my screen that I currently have a Gatsby template loaded up. This is a template that I built out over the last few weeks, and all of my images, all of my data is coming from WordPress via graphical queries. And if I go to my blog page, you'll see that I have a hero banner along the top. And this hero banner here is actually coming from some customizer options that I created in WordPress. So in my customizer, you'll see here that I have a global options tab, which I created. And in here I have several hero banner images that I created. All right, so there's my blog template hero banner, which is the one you see here. And then if I go to categories, you'll see my archive template hero banner, which is the one you see here. And my tags, it's my tag template hero banner. And there's the image there. So this is Harley Davidson image right here. Right, so basically in order for me to get these images to show up in Gatsby, or to pull them into Gatsby, I had to expose them to the REST API. And so we're going to jump into the code now, and I'm going to explain to you how the code works. And hopefully this should give you a better idea of how the REST API works and how to fetch your own custom data and expose it to the REST API. So I won't actually be typing up code for this video. I'm actually just going to be pasting in the code for each section and explaining how it works. All right, so I've already gone ahead here and I've created a just a class. It's called My Customizer Options Controller. And there's essentially three parts that we can do here. This is like this is pretty much the most basic way to set it up. There are additional features that you can add to the code, such as callback permissions and a few other things as well. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to keep it fairly simple, and I'm just going to show you guys pretty much the three minimum steps you need in order to get your data and return it to the REST API. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to define our constructor. So I'll show you what the constructor looks like. All right, so public function construct, we define a namespace. The namespace is the first part of the JSON URL, and the resource name is the actual endpoint of the URL. And I'll show you in a minute just how this is going to work in the browser. Actually, let me just show you right now. All right, so what we have here is we have WP API Customizer v2. Right, so what we need to do is we need to call WP JSON. All right, so we have WP API Customizer v2, and then we have Customizer at the end of that. So if I run this now, you're going to see that it's going to throw an error because the class hasn't been constructed yet. Right? So this class is actually already being called in my functions file, but because I don't have any code in here yet, it's throwing that error. Right? And I'll show you the functions file at the end of the video once we finish setting up this class, how I'm actually loading the class through the functions file. Okay, so we've gone ahead and created our constructor. We've defined our namespace and our resource name. The next thing we're going to want to do is we need to register our routes. So that's what the register routes function looks like. So within register routes, we are calling the register REST route method, which is provided by WordPress. We're passing in our namespace, and then we're passing in our endpoint, and then we're defining an array, and then another array, and then we're passing in our methods. So this could either be WP REST server readable, or it could just be a simple get, right? So essentially what we're doing here is we're doing a get method, right? Because we're getting the data. We're not doing a post. It could also be post, but in this case we're doing a get method, right? And I'm actually just going to leave it at get just to show you that this also works. Actually, I'll update that later on in the video, but so for now I'll just leave it as WP REST server readable. And then we have a callback, and this callback is going to be calling a function called get customizer options, which is going to be the next function right here, which I'm going to paste in. Give me 1 second, right here, and there it is. Okay, so now we have our get customizer options function, and this is where I'm actually grabbing my custom or my customizer options that I created in WordPress. So you see here, archive page hero image equals get theme mod. Get theme mod is the native WordPress function, which is used to retrieve customizer options. So get theme mod, archive page hero image. I have my tag page hero image and my blog page hero image as well. So all of these three images are being grabbed from the WordPress database. And once again, these variables here, they match up or correspond to these fields in our customizer area. Right, so the next thing I'm doing is I'm just creating an empty array, and I am essentially pushing my variables here into this array, and then I'm just checking to see, sort of as a safety precaution, if count customizer option is equivalent to 0. I'm going to return a new WP error, which says no customizer options found. And this will actually show up in the browser if there's no customizer options. This is just a simple safety check that I'm adding just so this data here doesn't continue to run in case this customizer options array is empty. Right, so if that doesn't return, then the code continues. Right, so else return our customizer options to the browser. So here I've created a new empty array. I've also created an index, which I'm going to be iterating through in the for each loop. Right, so essentially what I'm doing here is I created a for each loop, and I'm actually looping through this customizer options array that I defined up here, and I'm looping through it as a key value. And what I'm doing now is I'm pushing each of these values from the array into this options array. All right, so array push options, and I'm passing in a JSON object, right? So I'm using JSON decode. I'm assigning an ID, which I'm assigning this index here. I'm giving it a name, which is a key, and the source URL, which is a value. So source URL, the value is essentially the value of the get theme mod. Right? So the name, what I'm defining here is archive hero image. That becomes our name, right? And then the value becomes archive page hero image, which gets assigned to the value, right? And the ID is required if you want to make this available in GraphQL or graphical, however you want to pronounce it, right? If we omit this ID, then this data will not appear in GraphQL. So that's the reason why that's the reason I'm inserting an index here, right? So once that's done, once our array is ready, I return that array to the WP REST response with a status of 200, right? So just telling it that it's been a success, and here's our data. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to jump back into the browser, and you'll see now that if I refresh this page here, it should get my data. There it is. Perfect. So this is essentially the structure that you should be seeing in the browser, right? So it should be an array. It's basically an array of objects, right? And there's our ID, there's our name, which is archive hero image, which I said was right here, archive hero image, and the value, which is the URL, right? That's the value that's being returned in this variable here, archive page hero image. Okay, so there's our data being exposed to the REST API. And I can show you guys what it looks like in GraphQL. And actually, before I do that, I just want to backtrack here a bit. So going back to our where we register our routes, I mentioned here that we can actually use a get method, and this also works. So just to show you that that works as well, if I hit refresh, so there we have it. So our data is still coming through. All right, so I'm just going to set that back to WP REST server. Okay, so now I'll just quickly load up GraphQL. I have it saved right here. All right, okay, so here we have it. So all WordPress API, all WordPress WP API customizer. So we want to go edges, node. We want to get the source URL, the ID, and the name. And if I hit play, you'll see that our data is coming through. I got the source URL, name, archive hero image, tag hero image, blog hero image. Perfect. And just to show you guys that that if I remove the ID, all right, so let me go here. Let me remove this ID. This is the first parameter. Let me hit save. And I think I need to restart the Gatsby server in order to, yeah, give me 1 second here. I'm just going to restart Gatsby. Okay, so I've restarted the Gatsby server and I just refreshed the page, and you'll see here that our customizer option is now gone. So all WordPress options, so all WordPress WP API customizer is no longer in the list. And that is because I removed the ID from the code, right? So I removed it from that from the JSON object. So if you don't have an ID included here, it will not show up in GraphQL. And that's kind of something that I figured out on my own through trial and error. Because for some reason my data wasn't appearing in GraphQL, and I was kind of scratching my head. I had to do some research on Google to sort of figure out, the answer to it. And I actually ended up finding a forum post where somebody mentioned that the WordPress ID was missing, and that's why the data wasn't appearing in GraphQL. So I came back here and I added an ID field, and lo and behold, it worked, and my data was showing up in GraphQL. So it's very important to have that ID parameter passed in. So in this case here, I just created my own ID. I just created a simple I variable, and I'm just incrementing it through the for each loop. All right, so basically each entry just has an ID of 1, 2, 3, right? And if there's more entries, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth, right? So that's pretty much how you basically that's the most basic way to set up a your own custom REST API. And in order to load up this file, you actually I'm actually doing it in the functions.php file. So you'll see here that I'm actually including it. Here, these are some. I have another REST API here for sidebars. But you'll see here that I'm including my file once. Get template directory, includes classes REST API, customizer options.class.php, which is here if you look at the file structure, right? And then just below here, we need to add an action which hooks into the REST API init. And then the callback function is just a custom function here that I created, register routes, PML and register routes. So that function is right here. And what we need to do is we need to just create a variable and just instantiate the class. So controller equals new, my customizer options controller, right? So that's going to instantiate the class, and then we need to call the register routes method on that controller or on that class. And that's pretty much how you hook this up and get it all working through the functions.php file. All right, guys. So I hope you guys found this video useful. I didn't want to make it too long by typing in every line of code, because that would have ended up, being a 30-minute video. I thought I would just copy and paste each section and kind of explain it, and hopefully everything made sense. If it didn't make sense, if some parts didn't make sense, WordPress does have some pretty extensive documentation on working with the REST API class. So I would highly recommend, just doing a Google search for REST API WordPress class, and you should see it come up. It should be like the first or second link on the list. It's not that hard to find, and they have very extensive documentation on how all of this works. That's pretty much how I learned it. I had to, sift through their documentation, and it took me like maybe half an hour to read through all of it. But this is pretty much kind of like the bare bones. This is like the bare minimum you need to get your data exposed to the REST API. And I actually have this code available on my GitHub account. Let me see if I remember my name. GitHub. Actually, I'm already logged in. So you guys can actually grab the files for this from my Gatsby WordPress starter theme. Right. So in the includes folder, I go to classes. I'll go to REST API, and there it is there. So this is all free. It's available on my GitHub account. I'm going to post a link to my GitHub account in the description below, so you guys will have access to this. And I also have, you guys can also feel free to download my free Gatsby template, Gatsby WordPress starter. You can also take a look at the code in here of how I'm actually loading this data in Gatsby using GraphQL queries. So this should be useful here. And again, this project here is actually this website here that you're looking at, right? So you'll see here that I have all this data being pulled in from WordPress using GraphQL queries. And I might actually make another video of this in the future, showing you guys how to actually use GraphQL if you're not familiar with it. If that's something you guys like to see, leave a comment below, let me know. And I might even do another video to actually show you how Gatsby itself works, and if you're kind of like sort of in the dark as to how a headless CMS works, I'm thinking of doing a video on that one as well. So yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys found it useful. If you did, please like and subscribe. I would appreciate it. And I hope you're all staying safe out there, given the current pandemic that we're all going through with COVID-19. Hope you're all doing your social distancing and staying safe, and hopefully we'll get through this. So anyways, guys, thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. Again, if you like what you saw, like and subscribe, and I would greatly appreciate it.